Welcome, all my viewers. I just wanted to come on here and let you know I am so thankful for the growth. Thank you so much for all the likes and support. I really appreciate it. If you'd like to see more of my content, please subscribe. But without further ado, sorry, I can't pronounce things sometimes. Without further ado, please enjoy the video. 30 minutes after speaking with Brady, Coughlin and I arrived at Baker Beach, a curving acre of sand on the Pacific coast with a Golden Gate Bridge to the east of the rising into the morning sky. The night shift had taped off the morning parking lot, including all but law enforcement vehicles. I badged the uniforms at the corridor. Richie parked the car, and I turned off the radio and got slowly out of my car. Vehicles are not allowed on the beach, but in this case, Claire's team had bypassed the beach ban on vehicles being driven across the sand to the horseshoe of the yellow tape. The primary perimeter that took the section of the beach around the victim and the water's edge. I saw the stoop under the form of the Gene Hollows crime lab director, Ann Clapper's new head of forensics, standing just outside the tape with his team taking photos. Sketch the location, but that's all of the crime scene they'd be processing. No footprints, no car tracks, no other body in the surf. For detectives from Northern Station interviewed the growing crowd of surfers and beachcombers and the early morning nudists in the parking lot, towels around their waists. The detective would be asking people for any information they might have about anyone or anything out of the ordinary. Good luck with that. The baby could have been dumped into the water anywhere along South Bay. Lieutenant Tom Murray came over to me and unofficially passed the baton from missing persons to homicide. He said, "Freaking tragedy. I've sent my preliminary report to the chief and copied Brady. We'll keep searching for the child's mother." I mumbled something like monster. "Keep in touch." And just then Brady pulled into the lot next to it, an unmarked police vehicle. Probably Clapper's ride. I saw him crossing the beach below, walking toward Hollows in the CSI. Richie and I headed out, crossing the asphalt and walking down a path to the primary scene. Claire was hunkered down near the body, but not touching her. Her techs stood by their vehicles, each holding something, a sheet, a body, a bag. Claire was waiting for us to view the body in the situ, and then she'd take the deceased to the morgue. Richie headed for the tape, and I stood to watch the little girl's red hair moving with the action of the surf. Claire stood up. Of all days to return to the job she loved, her first case was a young child. The grief I felt for a baby I had never known was mirrored in Claire's face. I reached for Claire, and then we went into each other's arms. There would be no happy ending for this dead child. All we could hope for is answers into how and why, and who had ended her precious life. I stood with Coughlin and the Hollows outside the barrier tape, only yards from the shoreline where the little girl was in danger of being reclaimed by the tide. A clean white sheet had been laid above the waterline, and as I watched, the almost living surf bathed the girl. Clapper broke away from the crowd of CSI and waded into the water and lifted the child's body out of the ocean. He walked a dozen yards up the sand and gently placed the little girl on the clean white sheet. If there was any doubt in my mind that this was the same Lori Brooke I'd seen in the photo Kathleen Wyatt had shown us, it was gone. Clapper stepped back to let CSI take more photos. He glanced at me and said, "Boxer, you've got the case." When I didn't answer, he said, "Brady's here, on his way down." I looked up and saw Brady making his way along the path of the beach. A few yards away from where I stood, Bunny Ellis, Claire's lab assistant, folded up the sheet around the child, left side, right side, tucked up over her feet, then turned down over her face. Hollows unzipped a small-sized body bag and laid it down next to the sheet. Claire picked up the shrouded body, laid it inside the bag, and then Hall zipped it and carried the dead girl's body into the rear doors of the ME's van. There were solemn moments where no one spoke. Even the people watching from the parking lot up on the hill were buff and quiet, and then a scream shattered the silence. A woman came out. "Lori!" I looked towards the parking lot, flickering with my gaze over the bystanders, and then I saw her. Kathleen Wyatt. She was wearing a blue sweatshirt and black watch cap leggings. Even from where I stood 100 yards away, I could see the anguish on her face. I started running across the beach, taking up the path to the parking lot. Kathleen started running to me. Kathleen was only a few yards away from me when I called her. I meant to comfort her, to let her know that I would tell her everything was going to be okay as soon as I could, but I didn't get the chance. The doors to the ME's vans had closed, and it started up to the road service, the park's employee vehicle. Kathleen evaded me and ran in front of the van. The van squealed to a stop, and Wyatt went to the rear and banged on the doors, calling her granddaughter's name. I pulled her away from the van, much stronger than Kathleen. I was able to hold her and signal to the driver to go. "I can't leave her alone," Kathleen wailed. "I have to stay with her. Kathleen, Kathleen," I said, spinning her around so that she was facing me. She looked so stunned. I wasn't sure that she was actually seeing me. "Kathleen, the medical examiner is one of my best friends. Dr. Washburns is a great woman. She has 3 kids, including her youngest daughter. Lori will be in the best of hands. If we are going to find out who did this to her, we have to know everything about her death." The word death was too much to bear. I understood that she couldn't yet absorb the truth. I said, "Kathleen, I am the lead investigator on Lori's case. I am going to find out what happened, and I hope to God that when we find Tara alive." As I held onto the sobbing woman, I wondered where the hell was Tara Brooke. I knew about her. According to her husband, Tara was off her meds, crazed, and had run off with the baby before. According to her mother, Tara had a married man and was unfaithful and brutal to her and her child. I was still holding Kathleen and had queued up on the words, "I am going to let you go now. Don't run." But I was stopped by the sound of a racing car motor. I looked up the bluff and saw a silver Audi skid to the halt next to the road. A man got out of the driver's side and began gesticulating to the uniformed cop blocking his way. I couldn't make out his words, but I knew him. Lucas Brooke. The sight of Lori Brooke lying dead at the water's edge had infuriated me. Someone had miraculously killed that helpless little girl, and I was outraged. But I couldn't show it. When I saw Lucas Brooke, our number 1 and only suspect, arguing with a cop in the parking lot, I wanted to throw him down and arrest him. But I couldn't. I didn't. I kept my grip on Kathleen's biceps as I looked around for my partner Coughlin, and then I saw him far down on the beach, conferring with Clapper and Hollows, and the 3 facing the ocean. Clapper was making circular motions with his hands, no doubt describing the tidal patterns. Lucas spotted me, and he called down from the parking area, still holding Kathleen by the arm. I told her. I turned and looked at him. He'd made a megaphone with his hands. Sergeant, is it Lori? No one will tell me. This is insane." I shouted back, "Hang on, I'm coming up." Kathleen and I were alone on the footpath. I didn't want to bring her into the proximity of her son-in-law, maybe set off a confrontation. Turning to her face, I said, "Kathleen, wait for me here. I'll be right back." I had a plan. I'd get a couple of uniforms to drive her home, and then 2 more to take Lucas to the hall and hold him until Coughlin and I could settle him into a box with a cup of coffee and sweet him until he gives up everything. My big idea fell apart instantly. Kathleen jerked away from me, ran up the footpath to the parking lot. She was fast. Even at a 45-degree angle up that hill, on sand, she ducked under the tape, raging, screaming accusations at Luke. She reached him before I could catch up. The lot was still filled with sightseers who backed away from Kathleen as she closed in on our son-in-law, cursing him for killing her granddaughter. There was zero proof of this, but it didn't matter to her. She had all the evidence she needed inside her grieving heart. Lucas yelled back, telling her that she was crazy, that he had nothing to do with this fucking tragedy, to get the hell away from him or she would be sorry. I was still in the car's length away from her, and she kneeled her son-in-law hard in the groin. He howled, grabbed himself, and yelling in pain, but Kathleen wasn't finished. She pulled back her arm and socked him hard in the face. There was so much ambient noise coming from the lot, talking, shouting, sirens. I didn't hear the impact of her fist connecting with Brooke's nose, but I saw it. Brooke cupped his face with his hands and screamed, "Get away from me, you maniac!" Even as Kathleen pulled her fist back, teeing up to punch him again, I yelled, "Hey, hey!" Got between them, and at the same time, a pair of uniforms pulled Kathleen away. This time, it took both strong cops to hold her. I said to the closest officer, "Drive Miss Wyatt to her home and sit with her until further notice." The two uniforms muscled Kathleen Wyatt towards the rear seat of the cruiser, but she was manic, struggling and even biting, until the larger of the two cops said firmly, "Miss Wyatt, stop this crap right now or I'm going to cuff you. You are not going to act like that." Those were the magic words. Kathleen sagged and allowed herself to be folded into the back of the car. Lucas Brooke, the injured party, was pacing, head down, blowing his nose onto the asphalt, blood and tears dripping out of his shirt. I put my hand on his shoulder so that he would look at me. I said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Brooke. The victim is a child who matches Laurie's description." He groaned and covered his face with both hands. "This can't be true," he said. He sobbed that he didn't believe it, that Tara would never let anything happen to Laurie. "There's nothing you can do here, Lucas. Come with me. I can answer some of your questions, and you can help us too." I looked at him appraisingly. "Is your nose broken? Do you want to go to the hospital?" No. I suggested taking him back to the hall. I would drive. He would sit in the passenger seat. But, again, my brilliant plan fell apart. The show wasn't over. The tourists were getting into their vehicles. A cop was directing them out of the lot into Boley Street. But traffic jam had formed both inside the lot and beyond. Where vehicles had slowed to get a look, part of the logjam was caused by the sound truck making WKOR. Not even 2 hours had passed since we got to the called topside. I said the press leaving their cars and trucks double parked and at all angles, making the road impassable as they stamped towards the crime scene tape. I recognized that several of the reporters, they were the A-team. The standout, of course, Cindy Thompson, tape recorder in her hand, pointing at Lucas Brooke. It was up to me, rather, to let them report around Lucas. I let them. Brooke bit. He stepped up to the barrier tape separating the parking lot from the road. "I haven't seen her," Lucas was saying to Cindy and the mob in general, "but I have been told that my baby girl is dead. Tell my wife she has to come home." It was too much for him. He turned, searched for me among the reporters, and together we pushed our way to the road. "Keys?" He handed them over and got into the passenger seat. If Brooke was innocent, he had truly believed that Laurie was fine and that he would see her and Tara again. He was shocked and horrified and deep in some hell-seeing images, too awful to bear. But if he'd really killed his child, killed her, then he was extraordinary actor. But some killers are. I needed some time with him to figure out which one he was. I needed time to chip away at his story, nail down a timeline. I needed Coughlin to befriend him, coax out Lucas's story. If I felt my own anger taking over, I was outside the driver's side of Brooke's Audi, on the phone with Coughlin, when Lieutenant Brady walked to the tape and addressed press. A child was found dead in the water 6:15 this morning. Y'all have heard this before. We have no comment ongoing in the investigation. Chief Clapper will call a press conference when he has something to tell y'all. Please help us by moving your vehicles out of the road. That's it. Thank you. Brady ducked under the tape and cleared the lane. We took off towards the hall.